reading from the Gospel of St. Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Thanks be to God.
Morning. This is a sermon on loneliness, and the Lent series is not a very cheery headline. There's loneliness, lament, and loss. And some of you may know that I barely get through a cheery sermon here without crying. So when I was given such a depressing topic, I was a bit worried. But therefore, what you're going to get from me is 5 minutes of rubbishness, stats about the problem, about how this is an issue, and then hopefully a few talking points on good things that are happening. So, I'm a lawyer. First, the definition. The Cambridge Dictionary defines loneliness as the state of being lonely. Anyone got a Cambridge degree? I don't find that wildly helpful. What's it like to be Tim? It's like the state of being Tim. So, the NHS website nails it a whole lot better. This is a long definition, but it's, in my opinion, very good. And everyone's experiences of loneliness are different. It's very subjective and personal to us. You should not blame yourself for feeling lonely now or at any other time. And it's really important to remember that loneliness and difficult feelings can pass. Some ways loneliness can be experienced are emotional loneliness, so a lack of emotional attachment to someone like a close friend or partner. Social loneliness, so a lack of friends to go out with or hobbies to share, or who to share our hobbies or interests with. Or existential loneliness, which is a sense of being in a room with people, but you still feel alone. Some people experience loneliness occasionally, perhaps at a time like Sundays or Christmas, while others feel loneliness all the time. I thought that was so much more helpful than Cambridge University. It also made me think that it isn't helpful solitude. I want more than anything to spend 6 hours sat in a bird hide at a nature reserve, so cold I can't feel my feet, waiting for the kingfisher, or on a really good day, the otter. But that's my choice, that's a freedom and a privilege. That's not loneliness by this definition. This definition seems to say it's something we don't choose, it's not a happy feeling of solitude. Sometimes I have come to this building wanting to have a chat and wanting sociableness and wanting people to come and speak to me. Sometimes I want to run away to St. Chad's Evensong so I can be anonymous and no one knows me. That also isn't loneliness. I'm choosing that solitude. I'm fulfilling a need for peace and calm and silence. When I was Googling what to talk about in terms of loneliness and Lent, a lot of the blogs I read were about Jesus in the desert. But again, I couldn't decide whether that was loneliness. I thought that was, in a way, a choice, or at least purposeful. I genuinely don't know whether Jesus in the desert was lonely or not, and there's lots of interesting stuff to read about it if anyone would want to. But as I say, that NHS definition makes clear that this loneliness as a hardship is something we don't choose, and it's a problem for some people. So here are your stats. There's a few of them, there won't be a test. But as to get us into the topic, I suppose. Leeds Beckett University, this was a paper they did on the state of men's health. It says this is a local paper. So almost 1 in 5 men in Leeds live alone. Nearly 2/3 of residents in city council high-rise flats are male. And that type of housing can be linked to high levels of depression and social isolation. And most residents in those flats are typically aged between 31 and 60. So for Leeds, it says that there is quite a problem with loneliness in that specific demographic. This was a Leeds Live article from January this year, and it said the loneliest place to live in Yorkshire was Hull. 10.4% of people said they were often or always lonely, but then that was followed by Leeds with 8.4% of respondents saying that they sometimes or always felt lonely. And then this is a national one. This is called the Community Life Survey from last year. It said 7% of people said that they felt lonely often or always. 20% of people said they never felt lonely. It then gives a few breakdowns by category. I thought I could do it like Bruce Forsyth, play the cards right, but that seemed insensitive. But if you want some age stats, this was people who said that they sometimes or always experience loneliness. If you're 16 to 24 years old, that was 10%. If you're 25 to 34, it was 9%. If you're disabled, it's 15%. It then goes on, and not my terms, they're quite blunt sort of survey terms, but people who have gender identity issues, if they have a sex different from what they were registered at birth, 19% said they felt lonely. If you have a sexual orientation other than heterosexual, it goes up again, 15 to 20%. The ethnicity stats are basically all over the place, and I couldn't see any correlation at all. But there were some religious ones. Non-religious adults, 8%, whereas Christian adults, 6%. Not much of a difference, but I wondered if there was something in it in terms of we as Christians having this community. It said that adults who have never worked or are long-term unemployed, 15%. And generally, as deprivation increased, feelings of loneliness also increased. For me, it made me feel obviously totally fine. I'm heterosexual, white male Christian. I'm not going to be lonely. So, there's your 5 minutes of stats. The real joy in researching this topic was finding out some pretty cool things that are going on in the city. So, these are some Leeds topics. The Leeds Mind Befriending Service. I know that some people will know some of these things already. But the Leeds Mind Befriending Service says that it works with people who are over 50 in and around Leeds, who may be struggling with loneliness or social isolation, and they offer one-to-one befriending partnerships. My sister used to volunteer for an organisation like this. Very cool, real sort of roll your sleeves up, get to know people and build relationships for both volunteer and the people who are after that company. Another organisation called Linking Leeds. This is what's called social prescribing. I don't really know what that word means, but it says that it helps people to address any concerns they have in their life, maybe physical or mental well-being, debt problems, housing, loneliness. It helps actually get to know these people, see what issues they may have, and send them in the right direction. That's what social prescribing is. And then Leeds Mental Wellbeing Service with men's health champions. Again, I didn't really know what this meant, but I went to a men's health conference a few months ago, and there were blokes who were fitness guys. They were working at active Leeds gyms, and their role was to do the fitness class, but then also a specific bit of their job was to hang around afterwards to see if anyone needed a chat, and I thought that was very cool. There's those posters up in Leeds at the moment. I don't know if people have seen them. They're the anti-discrimination posters. It says, well, the council website says this. It says, what makes us different makes us Leeds. And there's lots of different posters, not just saying, we don't like racism, but there's lots of specific different ones. And it doesn't target loneliness directly, but when I've noticed those posters over recent weeks, I did think that it was a real Leeds thing, a way of us being together as a city, that we don't just not like one thing, but we stand together as a community, as a city. And of course, I think every social group, every youth group, every Page of Fuel cafe is of course doing a lot to tackle loneliness. So that was my first example of Leeds. My second example, my subheading is Jesus being awesome. I always like the sermons, not necessarily at this church, but maybe at others, where you have 3 points and the last one's Jesus. So Jesus is now point number 2, just to show you. The vicars are laughing. So this isn't the passage that Hannah read out, the Beatitudes are coming up, but this is John 8, 1-11. And this is where the people bring the woman caught in adultery to Jesus. And he says that famous line, he draws the line in the sand. And it says this: so at dawn he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people were gathered round him. And he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women, and now what do you say?" They were using the question as a trap in order to have a basis of accusing him. Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And then the crowd began to go away. And he says to the woman, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she says, "and neither do I condemn you." And in my opinion, so cool by Jesus. The quote in the parable is that this woman is brought to Jesus, as in not of her own accord. She's put there before this celebrity prophet to be judged and humiliated. When I tried to put myself in her shoes, I thought she must, in this scenario, feel very lonely. No one on her side, no one with her, no one caring about her. And Jesus absolutely flips it on its head. He does what everyone thinks he's not going to do. She doesn't think he's going to do that. The people who have set up this situation sure don't think he's going to do that. He says to her, "You're not alone, you're not ostracised." My phrase was, he gives her a metaphorical Jesus hug in that moment, saying that you're not alone, I am with you. And maybe a great example of what we can do to combat loneliness, to give people that metaphorical hug, to highlight their worth, to empower them. A moment of complete Christian beautiness that did make me think that the Bible is pretty cool. There were plenty of examples of anti-loneliness parables and anecdotes from Jesus' life and elsewhere. So example number 1 is Leeds, example number 2 is Jesus is awesome, example number 3 of course has to be what goes on here in the week at Rainbow Junction. Paul Magnall once told me years ago, I think I'd done a report for the AGM and I had described, I said the building was the foundation of this church, and Paul politely told me that's wrong. The people are the foundation of this church, and he is absolutely right. The work that goes on here isn't about the building, but about the people in it. I don't even know what the roof's made of, and all that fuss. The work the managers, the volunteers do here, day in, day out, is absolutely that warm Jesus metaphorical hug that he gave to that woman all those years ago, saying to people in this city, you have worth. In another way, I knew this vicar one time who would say to everyone, you are awesome. I checked the Cambridge definition of awesome. It says extremely impressive, inspiring, awe. That's a bit better than the other one. But there are people in this building, plenty of them, who give a lot of energy, a lot of awe to create an antidote to hunger, poverty and loneliness. And that same vicar would say something like, high five. Hannah read out the Beatitudes, and it doesn't actually say, blessed are the lonely, in the Beatitudes. But I thought at a church like this, I'd probably get away with reading into the Gospel. And I'm happy to read in that when it says, blessed are the poor in spirit, it certainly means the lonely. I'm also confident that when it says, blessed are the people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, it absolutely means the volunteers and managers at the cafe here who are doing their work day in and day out. I'm confident when I read Jesus' Beatitudes and blessings that they cover people who come here to serve others, and they cover people who come here who need to be served. And the great news is that that covers all of us. So Jesus blesses us all. My example number 4.
How many have you got?
There's only 4. Is another corny thing that preachers do, which is that I haven't come up with an example, but the 4th is to have some reflection for ourselves. I thought it was corny in Cambridge. The Cambridge Dictionary defines corny as emotional and obvious from having been used too often. So there we go. But I hoped that example number 4 may be yours rather than mine. Casper's got a good hymn lined up about God being with us. In gloomy times, we need that. And in Lent, we may reflect on our own periods of loneliness, or think what we can do when others have those periods too. There was a quote on the screen last week. I thought it was Mother Teresa, because it just said Teresa, I think, but I looked it up and it was actually St. Teresa of Avila, not a name I knew. But she was a Spanish saint. She lived 1515 to 1582, and Wikipedia describes her as a mystic and spiritual reformer. So I thought she sounded very cool. But the quote that was on the screen of St. Teresa was that Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. I'm not a Spanish saint or mystic, I'm from the posh suburbs of Sheffield. So my words, not hers. What I think she says there is that Jesus and God are not on earth like they were at one time. They left the Holy Spirit. But it means that it's down to us to combat loneliness. It's down to us to do the good work. And it's the challenge of how we use our skills and energy to combat loneliness. How do we do the things that Rainbow Junction does, the things that Jesus did, and give that metaphorical hug to other people? I think for the last couple of weeks, Toby and Meg have both tried to jolly us all to join the Rota. And one thing that we could do is be on the welcome team. I'm definitely a hypocrite. I'm going to decline that offer. I don't think my 2 screaming toddlers would be the welcome to all Hallows people would really want. But it would be a great antithesis to loneliness to stand on the door and say, welcome. So the invitation from me, a period of quiet, hopefully followed by a very cool hymn with Cuthbert. To think about whether you have an example of tackling loneliness successfully, or of how loneliness could be tackled better, or if we are lonely from God during Lent, then how we can invite Him better into our lives. And when you stand in the queue after the service, share your thoughts with someone if you want to do that. If you have those skills, reach out to someone new. If you don't, good news, because someone in this building is probably going to come and say hello to you after the service, whether you want them to or not. If you're in the headspace for quiet reflection, there's normally some prayers going on in the corner, and if not, get ready. Because if you are the sort of person to make friends, this is the place for you. And if you're the sort of person who wants to be made a friend of, then this is also the place.